Guys, what's up? How are you doing? And welcome back to the channel. Today, I've got a battle in Total War Pharaoh View. This is a battle that we did between yours truly playing as Bay and Captain Flower playing as the Peleset. This is on the Athens map that has been imported and slightly modified. Well, it's been imported from Troy, but it's been slightly modified, especially with stuff like the tower and all of these different capture points here, just making it slightly more interesting. But yeah, I would say Troy, it's been a blast so far getting into the Dynasties update with all the lethality stuff. This battle does have lethality in, so clubs, of course, are going to be slightly less damaging than stuff like swordsmen, just because of that low lethality. But javelins and slingers and archers are going to be the name of the game here. But yeah, let's just jump into the army comps real quick. Obviously, I won't go into it as in-depth as I do with Wars of Arda, because I'm sure lots of people who are watching this already have a pretty good grip of how units in the game work. And also, the meta isn't constantly changing the way it... Well, stats and stuff aren't constantly changing the way they do over in Wars of Arda. Obviously, I'm going to take a bit of time to go through everything, like what it's going to be useful for a multiplayer, because as far as I know, I mean, Reptilicus is going to do some of it, but I'm pretty much the only content creator covering Pharaoh multiplayer actually at the moment. But yeah, it's a bit of a shame with Pharaoh because it's a great game, but the multiplayer scene at the moment it's a bit dead, unfortunately. However, there are a few of us who do play, and there's going to be quite a few battles you see where it's like the same 4 or 5 people. Um, but yeah, hopefully the Pharaoh multiplayer does kick off pretty soon. Otherwise, it's going to make it a lot harder to cover this brilliant game because it is a really quite good game. I do really enjoy it. Obviously, it's not for everyone. If you don't like the hit point based combat, I mean, Pharaoh's a bit of a middle ground, but you still most likely wouldn't like it. So this absolutely isn't a video saying go buy Pharaoh, guys. It's brilliant. It's a video just highlighting some multiplayer stuff and hoping to draw attention to the multiplayer itself. Another thing I do want to say is if you guys are doing multiplayer, just send me some replays. I'll put my Discord DM in the description. That does go for Wars of Arda as well. If you guys have any Wars of Arda replays you'd like me to cover, if you just put the version of it that you're on, like if you're on one of the test builds, just say which one, and I will try and get it. Or if it's the public build, I will also be very happy if you want me to get that as well. I just might not be able to go into it in as much detail with the army comps as you'd like, but the meta itself hasn't changed that much from there. I mean, obviously missiles have been massively overhauled, but other than that, nothing's really changed. Yeah, enough with that rambling. Let's get on to the army comps. So Captain Flower here, he's gone for a lot of aspiring Peleset raiders, which it's not a bad shout. They're a really quite cheap infantry unit. I think he's got a good like 7 or 8 of them actually, I would say. Got 3 of them. 3, 4, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 18. He's got about 20 of them, so they're just going to massively pad out those numbers. But yeah, these guys, they're not particularly good. You can see they're 10 armor with only a 35% shield, I believe it is. 30% even. And pretty shoddy melee stats. However, they are a tier 1 unit, so it is pretty excusable. And of course, pretty average AP to melee damage ratio. But that's a pretty good one, 12 to 12. It's a good melee damage AP to base ratio, but of course, it's not that much damage in and of itself. And only having 5% melee lethality does hit them pretty hard. However, they do have some raiders and razors stuff, so clearly he might be hoping to burn some of the buildings. Though if he's hoping to do a lot of damage to the city, he's definitely chosen a pretty bad spot to deploy. Other than that, their morale isn't great, but their speed is pretty nice, all things considered. And if I remember correctly, they do also have the armor breaker trait. Yeah, they do. So that will make it so my armor does just degrade that bit quicker. However, I would say against Bay, it's not as important because, again, Bay is absolutely a faction that who does not rely on having good armor values. But I think if I'm correct, the highest armor value I've got on the field today is actually 50. And that is on 55 even. And that's on these Cane-like Stalkers over here. So Peleset here, they can absolutely outdo me on the armor front really quite easily. But Aspiring Peleset Raiders, that armor breaker trait they have probably won't be anywhere near as useful, but they are expendable, which means that if his higher tier stuff like Peleset Marines and the like, his Ox Carts, his Skirmishers, if they see them routing, it's not going to affect them anywhere near as much. Speaking of renowned Peleset Marines, he doesn't actually have any of the basic ones, surprisingly. I would have brought a couple of them, but I guess he is padding out numbers with stuff like Aspiring Peleset Raiders. And the renowned versions of these guys are very good in of themselves. 90 armor, so that lethality against them is not going to be particularly good. Got decent shields at 55%. Again, missiles in this game are almost a bit overtuned with lethality at the moment. In fact, pretty overtuned, but 55% shield should help protect them from that. Especially since they've got that shield wall formation as well, offering an extra 25% missile defense chance, upping that to actually 80%, which is absolutely nothing to scoff at. Really quite good morale, actually, at 79. They do suffer a little bit of the speed with 37, but I mean, against any other faction other than Bay, I would say that wouldn't be too much of an issue, but considering Bay is absolutely a faction that does rely a bit on speed and ambushing, that slightly lower speed could honestly come back to bite them in the behind, or bite them in the ass, whichever one you prefer. However, they do have a couple of javelin volleys that they can release before actually going into melee, and they have 15% range lethality, which they can hit me from a side. That's going to be really dangerous. And of course, 11% melee lethality, which is higher than I would have thought. But swordsmen, these are pretty good swordsmen, all things considered, as you'd expect from a tier 5 unit, but stuff like Aegean Bronzeworks, they lose their armor slower, Heroic Heritage, General's Dying won't actually affect them, Flanking Attack improved. They've got a lot of stuff going for them. Seasoned Pillagers as well could be really quite useful, and of course their melee stats are pretty good as well. 5 units of Peleset Skirmishers here. These guys, they can do a lot of damage. 50% shield value is really quite nice as well. And 7 ammo with 56 missile damage is also very nice. 50% range lethality as well is insane. That means half the javelins that hit will just result in a kill straight up. And the other half will still do 56 damage. So, pretty good. 85 range is actually really quite good for a unit of javelins. But their stats, again, not too bad. That armor will keep them alive a bit better, but really quite low speed for a unit of this type. But it's still a tier 4 javelin with 50 armor, so again, it's not too bad. They've got some pretty good stances here. Stuff like retreat and defend will do very nicely. Defend, of course, just offering that extra 5 melee defense, which could do a lot. Moving on, we've got 4 units of Ox Carts here. These guys, they can double up as chariots, but I believe they've also got an ability that means they can drop off those, looks like Peleset Swordsmen or Palasus Swordsmen that are on their backs. Yeah, it's definitely not Peleset Marines, looking at it. Possibly Palasus Swordsmen, especially considering they don't have javelins. These guys, they're not bad chariots, but the main reason you bring them is for that toggle mount option. Just having an extra unit of 42 men could be very useful, and it might mean these guys survive longer against stuff like missile fire, which again, really quite nice. However, they are pretty expensive if I remember correctly, so you're going to have to use them pretty well, getting stuff like flanking charges before you do end up just taking these guys off their mounts to fight in standard melee. And of course, last but not least, we have the general in a spear and shield bodyguard. Got a 75% shield, which is really quite nice, and not half bad melee stats either on top of that, with 24 shield value and 35 base value, meaning their defensive prowess is very good. Offensively, they're not bad either with that 40 weapon strength. And of course, they have a couple of abilities here. Favor of the Asclepius, just offering that little bit of casualty replenishment, while Ares Thunder can tank my soldiers' melee defense, and Shields Up will also make a lot of his soldiers actually resilient, like purely resilient to missile fire. And over here, he's just got a couple of aspiring Peleset raiders and a unit of renowned Peleset marines. So yeah, that's the attacking army I'm going up against today. He has made what I would consider to be a bit of a mistake by attacking this section, because it has literally just allowed me to hold up in this choke point. And it's actually going to allow me to get a lot of damage off potentially. Also, it does limit the surface area that he can damage as well. However, with my game plan, which you'll see pretty soon looking at my army comp and the way I've deployed, I do intend to eventually give up on this position. But yeah, I've got 4 units of veteran Cane Knight warriors. Of course, Axeman, 12% melee lethality is absolutely bonkers. And these guys have some pretty good javelins at 85 range and 15% lethality. Not quite as damaging as stuff like the javelins from the renowned Peleset Marines, but they've got pretty decent shields at 55%. Armor value may be tanking a little, but overall for a tier 3 unit, these guys, they're really quite dependable. 27 melee attack isn't great, but when you look at that, 18 AP damage is going to be really quite nice. And when you combine that with the just decent all-round stats they have, as well as that high lethality, they're going to be a really quite nice unit. What else? Then I've also got a couple of units of Canaanite ambushers here. These guys maybe have slightly lower man counts than I would have liked to see. Of course, 80 men versus the 90 men over there. Maybe that's an oversight by CA, or maybe it is just a balancing thing, but I mean, they do have 100 range, which is really quite nice. They're not half bad in melee. 11% lethality with those bronze swords they have on their belt there. And those javelins with 35% range lethality are going to be really quite nice. These guys do have that ambushes trait, which is permanently in place unless it's in grass, sand, or is on burnt ground. So on stuff like this terrain right here, they can actually hide on that. Like any kind of non-grass thing they can hide on. And sand, of course, is its own thing, as is the burnt ground. Got my General Bay in a Khopesh and Shield Bodyguard. Of course, Khopesh units are notoriously very powerful. That 4 bonus first shield and really quite nice melee AP damage even. Just offering them that more aggressive edge over swordsman, which really does benefit a unit like this. I've given them the Spearmaster 3, which is absolutely a mistake considering that said, I've brought quite a few low tier spears. So it might not go to waste as much as I thought it would, but going something like Axe or Swordmaster probably would have been better. But yeah, these guys have pretty good stats. 70 armor again, pretty nice, and 55 missile block chance with that shield. Then I've got a lot of Canaanite tribesmen. These guys also have that ambushes trait, which is going to be very, very nice. These guys, just the ability for them to remain hidden in a lot of terrain is going to offer them a lot of potential for me, especially with the fact they are chargers. So 37 charge bonus is nothing to scoff at. And that 14% lethality they have could mean they can rip through infantry formations, especially if they get that charge off. Their lower armor and relatively low morale does set them back, as well as those lower stats that they have. But with that 48 speed, they can pretty much dictate what melee fights they want to get into. unless it's against cavalry or chariots, but they wouldn't really want to go up against a unit like this anyway, because again, 22 bonus versus large means they're going to be hitting a lot of attacks off those chariots and cab. And with that 14% lethality, that's going to be really quite devastating against them. Brought a few units of Knight warriors. These guys I actually prefer a lot. I like these a lot less than I like the veteran versions for a couple of reasons. The first is that they don't have a shield and they also have lower armor, so missiles will just absolutely shred them. And because of that lack of a shield, they have much lower melee defensive stats. However, the other reason I don't like them is the fact they're swordsmen. That lower lethality that they have combined with the just lower damage output, especially in AP form, that they have is a very massive setback. However, they do have an extra volley of javelins, albeit less damaging, and they are cheaper, so they could actually, in terms of cost effectiveness, these guys could do a lot better than those axemen there. But at the same time, being very cost effective with these guys does mean that the only thing they're going to be able to beat is something like maybe the ox carts if they go in as a javelin, chariot even, but they should be able to handle a unit of aspiring Peleset raiders, especially if they can get those javelins off beforehand. However, 48 speed does offer them a pretty decent amount of maneuverability and does allow them to pretty much dictate what fights they want to get into. However, yeah, they do have that ambusher trait as well, but Spear on the Spokes on these guys is nuts, actually, thinking about it. They can do a lot of damage against chariots. I've got 4 units of veteran Knight slingers. Of course, not the greatest shields, but these guys with direct fire, not multi-shot, but direct shot here. 18% range lethality can do a lot of work. It does tank their range by quite a bit. I think it goes down to 120, but they get a lot more damage, and that 18% lethality up from 6 is actually nuts. These guys not half bad in melee. They are swordsmen, which, again, it's not something I particularly like. But the fact they're slingers does mean that they're very damaging. And they've got that ambusher trait as well, which means, again, despite that lower speed, they can still absolutely dictate the fights they're in. And sometimes if you can catch the enemy out, which in multiplayer you will be able to quite a bit, the AI less so because, of course, they can make those split-second decisions, and also they have eyes everywhere on the battlefield, don't forget. They can scan the battlefield far better than any player. Even Legend of Total War definitely can't scan the battlefield as well as they can, because he probably isn't much worse, but he's certainly nowhere near as quick as an AI. They can figure it out in less than a millisecond. So yeah, that ambushes thing in multiplayer is a very, very valuable thing to have. And last but certainly not least, I've got 4 units of Knight Stalkers. Again, these guys pretty good shields and 55 armor. So while they're not great in that department, they're certainly not skimping in it. Really quite good stats. They are swordsmen, so again, it's not the greatest, but they've got pretty good stats for a swordsman. And those couple of precursor javelins combined with that ambusher trait again does mean that these guys can do a lot of good work. 37 speed as well, not half bad. And when you couple it with that ambusher trait, it's really, really quite good. Strider as well means that they don't get slowed down or nullified somewhat in grass, which again, really quite nice. But yeah, that's enough with the army comps. Let us jump in. So, as you can see from the map here, it's actually got multiple layers, and that's the reason I was okay to give up this position. With this tower here, it can actually damage a lot of these units while they're trying to break through here, actually. And this is actually a really good defensive position to hold, because if you just set a unit of slingers up here, stick in direct shot, they can get so much damage off. And the fact he's deployed there does mean that I can absolutely limit this to just a one choke point battle, if I wanted to. Of course, with all of the units that are clearly going to be adept at flanking in the Knight Tribesmen here, or pretty much just a Cane Knight tribesman. These javelins here, if I can get some flanking shots off with those as well, that could be absolutely devastating. Because those shields, those big shields that a lot of the dangerous units of Peleset have, they won't be coming into effect there. Stuff like the Peleset skirmishers and his general and his Peleset marines, they're just not good enough at soaking up that javelin fire from the flank as you might like. But, I mean, no one's good at it. It's just, the difference is you can afford to sacrifice those Peleset raiders. Renowned Peleset skirmishers, with the price they cost, it's a lot worse off for you if you end up losing some of those. But already you can see Peleset, they've lost about 100 men, 160 men actually. And he is going to be content to just stick them on raiders and razors and just try and set some of my buildings on fire. Nothing's going to happen until he gets to about 3 or 4%, if I remember correctly. But the more assessment damage he can do, the worse my morale, melee attack, defense, and fatigue actually does get. So it is worth trying it, but sometimes, especially in this case, it might not be worth it as much. Maybe having a unit or two just hanging around, just running around all of this while you go into melee against my warriors here might have been a better shot, because at least you're getting kills instead of just standing there. I decide that it might be an idea to take a few shots with my veteran Cane Knight Slingers up here, but as you can see, they're not getting much damage because of that. Obviously, shooting from a longer range like this, especially with the not having the greatest angle, very few of those slinger shots are actually going to hit there. So after taking a few slinger volleys there, you will see me just decide, yeah, no, it's not worth it. Got a couple of kills off of that, but probably wasn't worth it in the long run. Especially considering they only got, what, how much damage? Only 1,400 damage off of about 4 volleys, if I remember correctly. Yeah, off 4 volleys. It's not exactly what you want to see. But yeah, you can see that my enemy here, Captain Flower, he is just trying to burn some of the city and just lower these stats of my guys. You can already see they're slowly going to be proccing up fatigue slightly faster than my opponents here. And these guys have bad vigor, which doesn't look like they do. That is something I guess the aspiring Peleset raiders do have in their favor. There's a couple of things. First off being Armor Breaker, although in this situation it doesn't matter as much. But in multiplayer I can see a few distinct abilities being very useful. In sieges, raiders and razors, if you choose the right place to make your initial assault, that could be very useful. Just being able to damage the city as you go through it. And again, just reduce your opponent's stats. You can already see -1 melee attack, defense, and morale. But it doesn't seem like it's going to do much. That could be the difference. That could reduce my kills by like 5 or 6 for every unit. Which again, it might not seem like much, but 25 times 6 is still a good 130 odd or so kills. In fact, no. 25 times 6, 120, 150 kills that could be me losing out on. Purely because of those slightly lower melee stats. And especially the fatigue build-up increase. That's going to be a massive hit. I suppose Baders have the positive insofar as a lot of your better units are stuff like medium as opposed to heavy, so they are just going to pick up on that fatigue slower than stuff like heavy units, which is a positive, I suppose. And you can see I've got a lot of light units here as well. In fact, I think Bay, yeah, even Bay is a medium unit. So getting that 2% fatigue build-up increase could actually be a massive difference maker, that, to be honest. Here I'm already just trying to get some cheeky bodies off with my javies. 6 kills already on these guys. It's a lot better. The way I see it is javelins add a lot of utility. It's one of the reasons why I think Thrace has one of the best native rosters in the game. The only thing holding them back in my eyes is probably the fact that Thracian Guard are a tier 4 unit instead of tier 5. And I know there's not a lot of tier 5 native units in the game, if that, but I think if Thrace could have one of those, that would make them a very, very nice faction to play as. But the fact they've got those early game plainsmen that are a tier 1 or 2 unit, I think, but they're very cheap at 430 florins, so they're well worth bringing, and they've got a couple of precursor javelins, right? So, for those of you familiar with historical, which I'm assuming most of you playing this game are, in Rome 2 there's a unit called Club Levy, and if you've been a long-standing member of the Total War community, which I'm sure a lot of people watching my channel are, Pixelated Apollo, he's done a video on Club Levy multiplayer actually details just how potent they can really be. And it's all down to those javelins that they have before they go into melee. They're not good in melee in the slightest, right? They will lose to most units. However, the fact they've got 2 or 3 Pelum before they go into melee means that they can get those kills off beforehand. They're like they're almost like a light version of something like the Peleset skirmishers here. Less lethality, less ammo, but they are still better in melee due to being a melee combatant. And they do have more men per unit as well, at 120 most of them. Obviously, the throwing sticks or boomerangs, more accurately throwing sticks because boomerangs are Australian, but the throwing sticks, and they are still a form of throwing stick, that said, but the throwing sticks that the stuff like the Magi have, while they are higher tier, it's very nice that they have it. And especially, I think it's the lower Egyptian guys that have them, those throwing sticks as well. Just mean that they're also a pretty viable pick. I would say javelins are much better to have. But as long as you're a unit that's got a precursor javelin volley or like missile volley, they can be some of the best melee units in the game. You can see here, Captain Flower, he's a veteran of the Total War scenes. He knows how to push through a formation. And he's just trying to get around these veteran King Knight warriors here. Now, I've got my slingers here on direct fire, and I see, hey, you know what? He's trying to get his very lightly armored aspiring Peleset raiders around my flank here. So, I'm just going to shoot him. With direct fire, that lethality is bumped up from 6% to 18%, and that damage is also increased, so even if it's not a lethal blow, it's still going to be doing more damage to these guys than it would otherwise. And they're low armor, and in fact, a lot of them are facing the wrong way. Is going to make them drop very quickly. However, I think I do decide very soon to just say, no, it's not worth it. And I try and get some shots into this place here instead. Obviously, I can see my veteran King Knight warriors here. They're going down pretty quickly, like at a rate of knots here. I've got another unit of them here, just hidden. But I do decide, you know what, this is actually going really well for me. I might move these guys up. Just these veteran King Knight slingers here. They're pretty good slingers, all things said and done as well, with that pretty decent... It's not a good shield, but ambushes keeps them alive a lot longer. And they're a pretty heavy slinger at tier 4. These aspiring Peleset raiders here, they're just broken. And they're actually going to cause me quite a few issues, because he doesn't know these guys exist at this point, right? But they route all the way down into here, so they end up just shooting them, which, again, it's a pretty big issue. Probably should have taken them off of fire at will, to be honest, if I was playing it smart, but hey-ho. With the veteran King Knight warriors here, routing it has allowed some of these Peleset raiders to get around flank. I mean, Peleset raiders here, you can see none of them are doing particularly well. Axemen just proving their value once again. Unfortunately, these guys couldn't get any of their jabbies off. I would have loved for that to be the case, but if you can't do it, you can't do it, unfortunately. But yeah, these guys, 91, 127 kills. Axemen just showing why they can be so incredibly important to a formation here. These axemen, the main reason they're dying relatively quick is more a case of there's a lot of them engaged in melee. So they will absolutely lose this fight, especially with that quality unit of renowned Peleset Marines there. But again, the other thing I forgot to mention is Axemen, they have a 5 bonus versus shield. So anything in this front line, they're going to have a bonus against. But stuff like Peleset, renowned Peleset Marines, with their 90 armor, they're going to be far more resilient to A, damage, and B, lethality. Because armor is something that does reduce lethality. The higher your armor value, the more resistant to it you are. But yeah, these guys, they haven't mobilized yet. I'm still feeling like he's got something over here, though. I just don't know what. I don't know if it's a unit. I don't know if it's 2. I don't know if it's like 6 or 7. Because again, at this point, I wasn't really focusing on how he's moving all of his armies up. Of course, he's captured a few of these fort towers here. And he's got a lot of his forces inside the city. I mean, most of his forces. Not most, even. He's done the right thing here, having a decent amount of reinforcements within a decent area compared to where the fight is actually going on. But also, he does see that this fort tower is going to be an issue if he moves everyone in here. So I'd say he's done a pretty good job with it. The ox carts as well, they can save them for later, which I don't really blame him for. If he moved them up now, I would absolutely just bring them down with stuff like Slinger Fire, so saving onto those is not a bad shout at all. But yeah, the veteran Canaanite warriors here just really showing how useful they can be. However, the fact there's a couple of units of clubs in there combined with those higher quality renowned Peleset Marines is actually really quite useful to him, to be honest. Just the clubs there being able to grind my armor down that bit quicker, combined with those Peleset Marines with that just higher lethality and just better in melee standpoint compared to the clubs. It's put them in pretty good stead. That armor as well, protecting them from the lethality of the axes, is also pretty good. So the main unit I'm scared of here is absolutely those renowned Peleset Marines, but he's got a pretty good army balanced around them. Stuff like those Peleset skirmishers here, they're going to be a massive pain in my backside. But the aspiring Peleset raiders, just being able to degrade that armor value of mine, even though it might not do the most, it will still mean he can get more lethal blows off, and it will increase the amount of damage he does to my guys, which again is really quite good. But you can see here, these guys, they're down to 21 armor already. And these guys down to 11. So, they're not doing too badly. That, obviously the assessment damage, 4% fatigue, and even more morale debuff is going to hurt a bit. But the medium tier nature of these guys is, the medium tier weight class these guys is absolutely helping them in this situation. I can see that, oh, it's looking a bit bad here, and I just start sending my veteran Canaanite slingers in. But no, he's moved his renowned Peleset Marines out, so I think, you know what, it's actually a perfect time to try and bring some of these guys down. They're far enough behind the front line that friendly fire should be relatively out of the picture. I mean, despite their really quite good shield, in fact, it's up to 80% now. 18% lethality is still absolutely nothing to scoff at. And you can see that they're taking a decent chunk of damage here at the hands of those slingers. And those are good slinger kills as well. I end up just charging these guys in there just to try and get these guys to rout a bit quicker. But fairly soon I realized, hang on, you know what, I actually need to pull these veteran Canaanite slingers back. Yes, I can get a decent amount more damage done. I can already see, like, I'm trying to focus these guys down here. And I'm doing so. I think I might get these guys to rout, actually. But there we go. I did underestimate the speed Peleset Raiders had, but I'm still going to get these veteran Canaanite slingers out of there. They might take a few casualties, but they're still going to get out, which is the important thing. I'm using these 44 veteran King Knight warriors to actually tank these guys. Because again, it's a unit of pretty like cheap. Well, it's very cheap in cost, so 43 of these guys. If I can get some of that slinger fire into the flank of them, these guys, they will absolutely rout with relative like ease. And you can see that I'm actually stopping my veteran King Knight slingers here, and I'm just gonna send some slinger bodies in direct fire mode right into the side of these aspiring Peleset raiders. Obviously, my guys are gonna take some damage here, but it's gonna be worth it in order to get rid of and rout a unit of these guys. So while they're not particularly good, that armor breaker attribute that they have combined with the numbers that they can bring and cheapness that they can bring, especially when you're down at the start by about 700 men, you do sort of need to just bring down as many of their numbers as possible. And I might not get many better opportunities than this to use direct fire anymore. So obviously the battlefield does open up a bit. These guys, they've left the settlement so that the towers should be able to finish them off somewhat. And of course, they're going to struggle to get through those gates there. But Peleset Raiders, they take a bit more damage. I don't really see them coming back. These guys do, but I think they will just stand there and get shot by the towers until they rout again, inevitably. Especially with their shields facing the wrong way. While 30% isn't the most missile block, it's certainly decent enough to warrant trying to use. But of course, he probably just hasn't realized that, hey, these guys have actually rallied. So it's looking like they're probably going to rout again, and indeed they do. They actually shatter. But yeah, looking at the balance of power here, you can see I'm actually ahead in terms of kills here. But even so, I'm not feeling the most confident because a lot of my army is still these tier 1 and tier 2 units here. The King Knight Warriors and King Knight Tribesmen. While they're not bad tier 1 and 2 units, they're certainly not the greatest. He's trying to run these aspiring Peleset Raiders through, but these guys do rally, so I just end up charging them in, and these Peleset Raiders are going to take a lot of damage just trying to run through this. They do manage to waste a bit of my javelin fire here as well. Another instance where I probably should have been paying more attention to them. But I think I do manage to get fire at will off of them in the nick of time here. Indeed, you can see, yeah, they're not firing anymore. I'm at these guys, they're routing, so I think I set these guys to chase them down while this unit just tries to tank this unit of aspiring Peleset Raiders here.
Your warriors are wavering.
But at this point for me, it's all about just trying to set these ambushes up. He's got a unit of aspiring Peleset Raiders that's running down here. And he's got a lot more guys that he can send up now. And again, he's still got those ox carts that could do a lot of... They cause me a lot of trouble. If he's able to use them the way he'd like to. But yeah, I've got a lot of ambushes here. I'm hoping that he does actually underestimate the amount of ambushes I can put off. Maybe he just thinks, hey, you know what? He's only got a few units here. That's the hope. But of course, it doesn't always pan out that way. This unit of veteran King Knight Warriors is going to get outflanked, so they're going to go down pretty quick. It's unfortunate, but hey-ho. My veteran King Knight Slingers have managed to get somewhat caught out here. They should win that fight, I think. Maybe not, actually. The extra lethality they have should actually be pretty good in their favor, though. And especially if I eventually get these guys to fire, which, yeah, I do now. These aspiring Peleset Raiders will go down with relative ease. However, what I'm trying to do is actually just move these guys down slightly so I can get an even better angle. If I can just get one volley off, that's going to be huge. But I'd also know that these guys are going to get... Oh my god, that was a brutal volley right there. 20 kills. But he's moving up some units of genuine quality now. Renowned Peleset Marines, they're going to cause issues. If I remember correctly, yeah, here we go. I've got a unit of Canaanite Stalkers over here just ready. Just ready and waiting. I'm trying to tank with this unit of veteran Canaanite Slingers while I deal with this unit of Renowned Peleset Marines and this unit of Aspiring Peleset Raiders
One of your units has
with
defeated
my
the enemy.
other 2 units of Slingers that I've got up here. I've got this unit of Canaanite Tribesmen here just waiting, ready. Seeing if I might be able to get some cheeky little ambushes off on these guys. Do I actually get my micro back on these guys? These guys still say they're moving fast, which I think actually might have meant I do lose micro of them. And indeed, it does look like that's going to be the case. Not getting that 37 charge bonus off is actually going to be a pretty big hit for them. Obviously, all that lethality that they do have is going to put them in pretty good stead, I would say, against a unit like the Aspiring Peleset Raiders. Though they are still going to take a lot of damage in that engagement now. But I think it is still a winning fight despite the slight stats discrepancy. It's not super high, but the lethality discrepancy here is absolutely massive. So we could see these Canaanite Tribesmen here just pull ahead in the later elements of this fight. This unit of veteran Canaanite Slingers, I just decided, you know what, I might be able to route this unit off, possibly. I just charge these guys in, which again, probably a mistake. But I do want to stop these guys from being able to reinforce this unit of Aspiring Peleset Raiders here. We're actually doing a lot better than I would have liked against these guys. I'm assuming it's going to be, if these guys got a charge off, these Aspiring Peleset Raiders would have been just done. But, I mean, it's still a pretty fair fight. I think the kills are going to start to go in favor of these Canaanite Tribesmen here, however. And at this point, it's just looking like a really quite messy fight. I managed to get a unit of my Slingers out of here. But this unit down here is more just trying to hold off this unit of Aspiring Peleset Raiders more than anything. While I can get these Canaanite Stalkers, just try and finish off these Renowned Peleset Marines here. They haven't managed to get any of their ammo off, which is a massive hit, actually. If they were able to, it could have been very, very nice. But as you can see, I'm trying to get these guys to just trap these guys down in melee. They've got a bit of a bug here where they're actually just able to continue firing while in melee, which is actually a big hit. That's going to mean that there's a lot of melee fights here, which if they couldn't do so, they would absolutely lose that melee fight, right? If they weren't able to get those javelins off, especially 50% range lethality ones like they are, these 80s Canaanite Tribesmen, they would have got a lot more kills off against these guys than they did. And B, they might have honestly won that fight. Obviously, if they got into that with about 100 or so men, they got a charge off. But yeah, that javelin fire coming in as well, that was just absolutely devastating. But maybe they'll end up using the rest of their javies on these guys. In fact, there's a unit, these guys have used up a slight little bit of their ammo on those guys as well. Yeah, these guys, they're out of javies, which is a positive, I suppose. Yeah, Canaanite Tribesmen, while they're not the best unit in the game, that high lethality they have is actually going to make them a lot better than they would have been in Vanilla Pharaoh. In Vanilla Pharaoh, they would have just lost to a unit like the Aspiring Peleset Raiders. But, I mean, that said, with the charge going off, they probably could have won it. But it would have been really quite close anyway. However, in Diocese, if these guys got the charge off and with lethality, they would have absolutely dumped these Aspiring Peleset Raiders. This unit of Renowned Peleset Marines as well, it's wavering. I might be able to get them to rout with this unit of Canaanite Warriors here. I've got another couple of them just trying to get up here. If I can just try and catch these guys out. Not sure what I'm doing with these guys.
Your hidden units stand revealed.
Maybe I see javelins. Oh no, I need to get these guys out of there, but
Listen to their agony.
if I was to do it again, I probably would have just YOLO'd them in there and tried to get a flanking charge off on these Aspiring Peleset Raiders. Could have bailed out these Canaanite Tribesmen here, maybe get some more units I can just use to push into here. This unit of Peleset Skirmishers here, I'm just trying to maneuver in a way where I can hit it, like pincer it almost from a variety of angles. if I remember what I'm doing correctly. It's always
Your
possible that
warriors
I
have
just
been routed.
don't, but very soon, if I remember correctly, these guys will move up. There's only 17 minutes left to this fight, and it's about just under half loss on my side, just over half loss on Captain Flower's side, but charging into these renowned Peleset Marines here, and I've managed to shatter this unit here. Finally decide, you know what, now's the time, and I charge into the flank of these guys. That does rout them off, so that's saved a decent amount of Cane Knight Tribesmen as well. They've only lost 40 of their number, but they've lost about half their health. This unit of Cane Knight Warriors here is going to lose these renowned Peleset Marines, but yeah, the Peleset Skirmishers here, the fact they can get Javies off in melee, it's a bug that I will want to report to CA, but that's actually making them so much better in multiplayer currently, because with that, you know that even if they get caught in melee, they're still going to get that damage off really quite nicely. The lack of armor, well, respective lack of armor compared to renowned Peleset Marines here, actually hitting these Kin Knight Stalkers pretty hard. However, they are going up against a couple of units of renowned Peleset Marines, and yeah, it's not the nicest fight, I would say, for them.
I need to rest.
So, while they are a tier 5 unit, so are the renowned Peleset Marines, and they are arguably just a better tier 5 unit, I would say. Purely because of that higher armor value. And they are actually just better stats-wise, I think, as well. Of course, armor isn't everything. If these guys could have got those javelins off beforehand, like all the javelins, if they could have got... with ambushes allowing them to dictate exactly what melee fights they want to get involved in,
By the gods,
that's
your
also pretty big
warriors
as
are
well.
rallying.
But yeah, I'm just trying to deal with as many of these renowned Peleset Marines as I can. The less these guys I have to deal with, the better. And also, the more javelin fire these guys use up, I'm thinking, the better as well. If I can get them to use up their javies on stuff like my Cane Knight Warriors or Cane Knight Tribesmen, the more ammo they use on these guys, the less ammo they're actually going to have to deal with
Your warriors are wavering.
my more important guys like the Cane Knight Stalkers. Because again, despite the fact they're, in terms of melee, they are weaker than renowned Peleset Marines, but in terms of usability, they're far superior. Obviously, in a siege fight, they're not going to be anywhere near as good, because they just can't outflank as much as I'd like them to. I mean, they're still not doing badly at all. This unit, 58 kills, is doing really quite well. 604 damage causes gold value, so these two units of renowned Peleset Marines, they will lose that. Even with the addition of the Aspiring Peleset Raiders, it's still a fight they're going to lose. And in fact, we've managed to get it down to one unit of Peleset Marines here as well. The other unit of them must have routed. I've got my javelins here just posted, waiting for them to break through here. Because I know that even if they're going to break through this unit of Cane Knight Warriors, right? It's a matter of time. But if I can split them up, like, some of them have to go after my Cane Knight ambushers, so not all of them can go after this front line up here. That's just going to make it look like a much better fight for me. Obviously, these guys, they will win this fight now. There's no two words about it. Especially with the armor scores being what it is. These guys down to 76 armor, so that lethality protection is actually a lot less important. And because of that... No, they are still medium. That's weird. I'd almost say maybe bump renowned Peleset Marines up to heavy as well. Just because looking at the unit, they don't really look like a medium unit. Cane Knight Stalkers, of course, they look like a light or medium unit, I would say, but renowned Peleset Marines, they seem like a very heavy unit. Which, them being a medium unit, it does feel a bit weird. So, of course, they've got the same amount of mass as these guys, but... which just mean that they're going to be more vulnerable to, like, heavy cavalry or chariots, but there's not any heavy cavalry in the game, if I remember. It's all stuff like medium cav. This unit of Peleset skirmishers is routed. I just want to fully deal with it. If I can get them to shatter, that's just gonna make my life significantly easier, really. So yeah, these guys, they're slowly going down. This unit's out of ammo as well, so if I can get some flanking charges done on them, that's gonna be huge. These guys down to about half ammo, but half ammo with that amount of lethality is still incredibly dangerous. Now that I've had to move the units I had over here all the way over to this side, that's a really quite good idea to spring this ambush now. I mean, it's not so much an ambush because, again, I can still see it coming relatively easily. I do actually, if I remember correctly, move Bay down to try and combat it. I know Bay's probably not going to win this, but with the tower over here, they're going to be able to slowly but surely plink away. I just get a lot of damage off, arguably, on these guys. Maybe even rout a unit or so. But over here, this unit's not doing too badly. These guys just trying to get into that position where they can fire. These guys have shattered. I'm going to get some decent charges off this unit of Peleset skirmishers. And again, a tier 4 unit getting pinned by 2 units of tier 1. Especially since those 2 tier 1 units are going to do pretty well against them in melee. Yes, they're out of ammo, but there's still 90 men that could be very useful later on. Especially with just being bodies chucked into the meat grinder against these King Knight Stalkers here. So I'm managing to get units around this general here. Gonna try and pin this unit of Peleset skirmishers in with these King Knight Stalkers, which arguably is a fight these guys should absolutely win, right? If I can catch these guys out in melee, even now down to 82 men, they should win that if the Peleset skirmishers weren't bugged. But as it is, despite getting into melee, these Peleset skirmishers, they're going to be able to continue shooting. And 140 javies, while it's not the most, it can still make a considerable difference. And you can see there, these guys down 62, these guys at 89. It's a pretty even fight. With those javelins coming in, it's just going to deal a lot more damage to these King Knight Stalkers than they're going to be able to dish out in this time frame. So it's not a good bug to have in the game, in my opinion. Especially because actually killing models does reduce the ammo of these guys. So the fact they're able to get javies off while they're in melee, A, they're going to be able to get more javies down range, but B, they're also going to perform far better in melee than they should. Because again, 28-38, that's not good stats. Especially when they're going up against a tier 5 unit like the King Knight Stalkers. These guys should absolutely dumpster the Peleset skirmishers here. It shouldn't even be a contest, but because of those javies that they can get off while in melee, which is just frankly bullshit. And CA, this is a bug that you do need to fix. But yeah, with those guys being able to get javies off, it's just they can win melee fights they have no business winning. While my King Knight ambushes here, they're not great in melee. Just the fact I managed to get a flanking maneuver on the general here is going to take away slight... No, I don't even get a flanking maneuver. My plan was literally deal with this unit of Peleset skirmishers, then do the flanking maneuver. Because I thought, hey, you know what? This is a fight these guys can win. And if I don't do that, they're just going to shoot me in the back.
The enemy general has perished.
But with the general dying, that's actually a massive hit. Units like these renowned Peleset Marines, which beforehand they could have rallied, they're no longer going to. These aspiring Peleset Raiders over here as well, the likelihood is they're not going to rally either. This unit of Peleset Skirmishers over here as well, they've been caught out by King Knight Tribesmen. They're losing that fight. Their generals recently died. They could rout as well. They're down to 8 leadership, hovering around 10 or so as an average, but went straight down to 3 for a second there. If I can get it down to -1 for any length of time, even if it's just a few seconds, these guys routing, that's freeing up a unit of 58 King Knight Tribesmen, which doesn't sound like much, but that could be huge. These guys drop down to -1 for a brief moment there, but they're staying at -1 now, and they do, in fact, rout. I do want to chase these guys down a bit more, just because, again, 30 soldiers is still could cause issues. I've got Bay here, just trying to hold this choke point here. I don't want to go anywhere further, because that just seems a bit silly. It's just opening the door for getting outflanked, really. But yeah, that's 2 units of aspiring Peleset raiders that get routed. At this point, I do decide, you know what, Bay, you can probably start running down. And you can actually catch these guys out here. It's 1 unit, so you're not going to get outflanked. But Bay is now in melee with the renowned Peleset Marines, who have taken a decent amount of damage. However, I do think they still win that fight. Maybe not. I don't know. If Bay dies, Bay himself dies, that does mean I think we lose this melee fight here. But if he can survive for long enough, I think it's might actually be a win. Especially with the arrow tower support. If it actually decides to shoot the right things, should be an easy win. And of course, the fact Bay is a Kopesh, while the renowned Peleset Marines are not, that's also pretty big. Or it might be a Sea People's bug. Right. I think it's just Sea People's. They can get Javis off in melee. Okay. That's interesting. Yeah, that's something I'm definitely going to highlight then. Yeah, as of now, in the meta, anything with a precursor weapon, especially javelins, is absolutely devastating. I'm seeing all of these ox carts here, and I'm just thinking, you know what? I actually need to bring some of them down. He's actually dismounting a lot of them, which is something I would personally disagree with. But again, it's not necessarily the worst shout. But I do need... I was more worried about seeing the ox carts thinking, oh, you know what? They might actually just be able to charge through my guys here. In fact, this unit of them here is trying to do exactly that. I got this unit of Knight Stalkers here, just waiting. If anything gets too close, they will just start shooting it with Javis, and they will bring them down relatively easily. Provided they can hit it, of course. Which is, again, easier said than done. But we are just bogging these ox carts down. He does actually dismount them there now. Which, again, it's not a bad shout. He's got all of these guys in melee. These Knight Stalkers here. These guys routing, that's pretty huge. It does open up a unit of 115 that I can actually use to just try and get around the flank. Maybe these guys, or at least occupy a couple more units of these ox carts. Yeah, numbers-wise, it's looking really quite bad for both of us. We're both down to about 500. Of course, it's looking mildly better for me than it is for Captain Flower, but with his general dying, that's actually huge. Of course, if Bay himself dies as well, that could swing the tables as well. And yeah, sure enough, Bay dies, and that caused my guys to be wavering. And there we go. Bay, well, not Bay, but Bay's bodyguard does rout. And that's opened up the gate doors to turn this into almost a reverse siege situation. I might honestly not have the numbers to be able to deal with this fort tower here if things go really poorly. So at this point, I realize either I need to deal with this unit of renowned Peleset Marines quick, or maybe I need to send this unit of Knight Tribesmen over to try and deal with it. But with these guys rallying, actually, that was really worrying for me as well. So that's another 80 men that he can chuck into this fight. Get around the flank of my Knight Stalkers, which again, it's really bad. However, this unit of Knight Tribesmen routing actually might have saved me here. Obviously, the fact they're running into my opponent is going to hurt, but it's going to buy me a few very valuable seconds. Or I can maybe get a few more kills on these ox carts, especially these ox carts here. The less of them I have to deal with, the better, of course. There's a unit of them that I... And these guys, there's 48 of them in a unit. No, 60 of them even in a unit. So they're not the biggest, but they're also not bad in melee either. They are the renowned Peleset swords, albeit with lower armor, actually. So just a weaker version of them, I suppose. Yeah, these Peleset skirmishers getting into my Knight Stalker's flank. I'm actually really worried about these guys routing here. 17 melee defense, relatively low armor, surrounded by a decent anvil, and like, while it's a mediocre hammer, these Peleset skirmishers could cause issues. especially with that flanking maneuver particularly. But those guys shatter. The general is wavering, so I'm nowhere near as worried about him, I would say. Like, if he goes into melee against Kane Night Stalkers, he should lose that. This unit of Kane Night Stalkers here, just desperately holding on. And that's what it's a case of at this point, really. This unit, I believe, does rally. Bay's bodyguard has shattered, if I remember correctly, at this point. But this unit here does rally if things go as they did in the battle. Or it was that unit there, one of these two. It's definitely one of the two over here. And I just see I need to deal with this unit of Renowned Peleset Marines. He's trying to cap the tower. That's just massive issues. So at this point, I'm just desperately trying to deal with these Ox Cart units. This unit, this General's Bodyguard over here, again, while it could cause issues, it's not the most worrying unit. But yeah, there we go. I do lose the tower there. This unit of Kane Knight Tribesmen, I might try and send up there. But I'm trying to run this unit away from there because, again, if I can get out of its range, these guys, if they can get a charge off, that's going to be really quite nice. But unfortunately, they do shatter before making it. These guys are hidden but getting shot, which is weird. I think that should be something that gets fixed because, yeah, they're unspottable right now. Are they hidden? Yeah, they should be. Yeah, at this point, Kane Knight Stalkers, I've almost got these guys routed here. And it's actually looking bad for me on the balance of power. You can see down to 217. My opponent outnumbers me at this point. And that's with 55 Kane Knight Tribesmen here, which are not good at all. But this flank routes, that's huge. I can get a charge into the rear of these Ox Carts here now. And I think they rout as well then. Yeah, there they go. They rout as well. The general shatters. And the balance of power is suddenly looking even once again. These guys wavering, they might end up routing. My guy's over here getting shot. I'm just desperately trying to run these guys down. Because, again, the balance of power slowly but surely creeping into my favor. These guys just free damage, really. And I know that if I have to go up here, it's just going to go really badly wrong for me. Now that he's moved off of there, I am slowly but surely capturing this tower back. So arguably staying there would honestly have been the better play. But I can see why he wanted to run over to the palace here. If he could cap that, that's minus 10 leadership for me. Which again, could be the difference between victory and defeat. But as it stands, I just about clinch that victory right there by the skin of my teeth. I think I was down to about 120 or so men there. Actually present on the battlefield. But yeah, let's have a look and see what did the damage for both of us. Okay, so you can see a lot of my tier 1 units not doing particularly well. You've got a couple of actually, most of them did decently. You've got a couple of outliers there with like 10, 15, 12 kills. But all of my units are consistently getting over 50. That unit of slingers, they're doing pretty disappointingly, but I think that is largely because I used them very disappointingly. And you can also see there just the value that, while these guys didn't necessarily get a lot of kills, and we've got a couple of units here that are getting stuff like 51, you got 30 kills there, 40 kills there. But you can see here, lots of the tier 1 units, they didn't do particularly well. These tier 2 units here didn't do too badly. That unit got absolutely clowned on, but I am assuming that's because they were going up against this tier 5 unit here in the Renowned Peleset Marines. And yeah, the battle actually came down to just these 2 units here. Which looks like it's about 150 or so men. Which is actually nuts. Especially for one of the newer titles. In the older titles, you could relatively frequently. I say that, maybe like 1 in 20 or so replays would feature a battle where it was proper down to the wire, like 20 or 30 men. But you could get a decent amount of down to 100, 200 men. But less so in the newer titles. But yeah, down to 150 or so men there. You can see my Kane Knight Stalkers doing relatively well. These guys far less well, but the rest of them doing Actually, even that said, 802 damage causes gold isn't half bad. My Slinger's doing exceptionally well. Even these guys not doing half bad, but these guys arguably doing the worst, but they were going up against a lot of the cheaper stuff. My Javelins, you can see there, getting pretty good kills as well. Bay not doing too badly. And my Veteran Canaanite Warriors showing the power that shielded Javs before you charge into melee, especially on Axeman. Just showing how much power that can give a unit. Again, these guys, they got Javies off before they went into melee. Just, again, showing how powerful Precursor Javelins can be. And if we look at Captain Flower over here, you can see 69 kills. Nice on the General here. The renowned Peleset Marines doing very nicely for themselves, as did the Peleset Skirmishers. That 50% missile lethality just being absolutely priceless to their prowess, and additionally the fact that they can shoot their jabs in melee, which I think might honestly just be a Sea Peoples thing. I haven't seen any other faction be able to do it yet, so it might just be the Sea Peoples that can. And the Ox Carts arguably just being really quite disappointing there. Maybe bringing a couple extra units of, maybe not the renowned ones, but just basic ones. Again, those Precursor Javies just could be really useful. Or maybe even a few units of Spearmen. Well, they do have only 5% lethality like the clubs. They do have much higher just defensive prowess. And stuff like Aegean Armored Raiders, they've got 55% shields, which is better than these guys. They've got pretty good armor, and their stats aren't half bad for the 830 price tag. Yeah, you can see here, all of his important units put in the work, while his less important units didn't. The Ox Carts, he should be relatively disappointed in, because, of course, they cost a lot of money. But I think that is largely just an Ox Cart problem. Maybe if he could have got a charge or two off with them before he had to dismount them, they could have done a lot better. But because of all the missile power I had over there, especially stuff like Veteran Canaanite Slingers in direct fire, in direct shot mode, the Ox Cart's days would have been very numbered against that. But yeah, thank you very much for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed, leave a comment, show your support, subscribe if you're around here. I try and upload Total War content relatively frequently. But yeah, finally, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.